let's return to the discussion about the border, but let's talk about Spain, because Pedro Sánchez, the Spanish Prime Minister, has made quite an extraordinary announcement via a royal decree. So Parliament is not even going to be consulted on this. They're going to regularize basically a huge amount, hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants, at least 500,000 people. And, this would be of interest to us as just a Spanish issue, but actually this has implications for the whole of Europe, because as soon as people are regularized in Spain, then they have the right to travel around the Schengen area as they please. Tom, what have you made of this? I mean, this is one prime minister in one country has made the decision on behalf of 500 million Europeans to fling open the border.
Where have we seen that before?
Yeah.
It's the thing, it's got shades of Merkel 2015. It feels like Merkel 2.0, Wir schaffen das 2.0, despite the disastrous consequences that wrought, not just for Germany, but across the continent. As you say, it has a knock-on effect. You're essentially opening Europe's borders in a sense, or at least creating a tremendous incentive for more migration flows, which will affect countries across the continent. So it's over the heads of Europeans, but it's also over the heads of Spanish voters. I mean, if you look at the kind of internal political discussions within Spain, very similar to many Western European countries, which is that immigration is rising as a particular issue. I mean, Sanchez got in last time around on a reduced number of seats. Actually, the centre-right People's Party did better than him. He managed to cobble together a kind of minority coalition government. So this is something which is over the heads of the Spanish people as well. As you say, these numbers suggest somewhere between 500,000, maybe 800,000. One thing I can guarantee you, it'll be much higher than that. It always tends to be. And it's going to supercharge a sense of division and also unrest, which exists within Spain as much as it does in many other countries. I think it was last year, there were some really ugly riots which kicked off in a southern Spanish town after an elderly man was filmed being beaten up by some North African migrants. This is not the way. Policies like this are an insane way to try and go about solving any of this, and it just lacks any real democratic basis. And you think, particularly because of the fact that a decade later, or more than a decade later from Merkel's unilateral decision, Europe is barely beginning to come to terms with the impact of that from an integration perspective, from a security perspective, and also just the political ramifications of it. Every major European country has a right-wing populist party which is either vying to become the opposition or potentially even into power. That was something that was unthinkable before that decision was made back in 2015. To double down to try and repeat it now seems absolutely insane.
And the Vox party in Spain, which I suppose is the right-wing populist party, their reform equivalent, is one of the more militant populist right-wing parties in Europe. I mean, it's further to the right than Reform UK or really any party that is in mainstream British politics. And I don't know what these open borders loving liberals are thinking when they impose policies like this. Do they really think things are going to get better? That discrimination in Spanish society is going to reduce, that community cohesion is going to be better, that people are going to be happy with this? How does that fit into their sort of liberal worldview of wanting to make their country a better place for all people, particularly women and minorities? I don't understand where they get their ideas from. And also, we have seen a reckoning of some centre-left parties in Europe, particularly the centre-left party in Denmark, for example, which has taken it has taken a very tough stance on immigration. So there is an alternative path to follow. One of the things that's interesting, though, about what's happening in Spain is there might be two things that are a little bit different from a lot of the immigration that we talk about when it's Germany or when we're talking about the UK or France. And maybe you can either agree or disagree with this, but I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this. So Spain has seen an increasing number of asylum seekers coming from Latin American countries where these are Catholics who speak Spanish, and Spanish has got a big problem trying to find people to do certain jobs. So there might be some factors of this immigration, if the majority of it is coming from Latin America, which is quite different to, I think, Merkel letting in tens or hundreds of thousands of Syrians, for example. Now, of course, there's still the issue with the Schengen zone and people moving across borders, because there's completely porous borders in the EU with free movement and people. But I just wonder if there's something slightly different about where these immigrants are coming from that makes the Spanish Prime Minister think maybe this time it'll be different?
Yeah, I think that is where certainly what Sanchez's defenders would say, and that is a large proportion of migrants, non-EU migrants coming to Spain. But a lot of the tensions are coming from migrants coming from Africa and the Middle East, and many of those are being there's record levels of people trafficking in Spain. Spain, of course, has an African enclave in, I don't know how you say it, Ceuta. It's actually part of Morocco, which people can quite easily cross over into and then become part of Spain. A lot of people are being trafficked via the Balearic Islands and things like that. So yes, on the one hand, you could see how there's a much clearer integration path for a lot of people in Spain, but it's also incentivizing that people trafficking that's going on. A lot of those Latin Americans come on a visa and then they let their visa expire. It's also a different mode of entry into the country. But certainly, if you're going to regularize, at least 500,000 illegal migrants, you are incentivizing that trade in people trafficking and inviting people to come to Spain from wherever they're coming from. I mean, it's been interesting actually looking at some of if you watch any of the TV news reports, a lot of the people they've been interviewing are Pakistani or people from far-flung parts of the world that have no association with Spain. So I think that's an important caveat, and it may mean that it's not quite as bad as people fear, but certainly it will send a message in the future that Spain is the place to go through if you want to stay in Europe, certainly.
And by extension, the whole of Europe.
By extension, exactly.
No, exactly. And just the extent to which, even whilst taking into account the nuances, just the sort of message this sends of a political establishment that doesn't want to listen to any of those concerns is something which is going to be lethal for Sanchez, I'm sure, as well as any other political leader who's tempted to go down this route. And I think people on the kind of more pro-immigration, pro-asylum side of things, purely by their kind of idiocy and zealotry, have destroyed the case for those things for a generation. I mean, there is a hardening on these questions, which you would think they would regret and want to kind of row back from. Even their inability to do the basics, like know who is coming in and who is going out on what terms, has made it incredibly difficult to get any level of public support for even relatively modest, let alone anything more generous policies when it comes to migration or asylum. So it's something which, if you really claim to care about this issue, their own the insanity to which they've approached this over the course of the past 10 years in particular, but a couple of decades in general, has destroyed the case essentially. And I think it's going to be a very long time for that to change in Europe or anywhere else.